I decided to surprise my girlfriend with a Spirited Away Bathhouse replica. This is her favorite movie. She loves all Studio Ghibli's movies, and so I was sure that she would be very happy with this gift. This was a super challenging project, but it was all worth it, so let's see how that went. I began this project creating a cube with this 2mm styrene. And as you can see, I've left one face open, and that's because I'll glue it to this other slightly bigger box right here. And to make these boxes and glue them together, I'm using this weld bond type of glue, which is specific for acrylic and styrene. And I forgot to mention it first, that I reached the dimensions for this project making this paper model first when looking into some reference material. And I'll create some features of the building, stacking some 3mm styrene pieces like this one right here on the side of the building. And also this one right here, which is the entrance of the building, and also it holds the balcony. And with that done, I could mark some lines to guide me when adding the windows of the bathhouse. Now, these are not just some regular windows, they kind of extend outside the building, so I'm adding right here some 3mm styrene pieces to create that volume, and then I'll add the windows on the top of that. This right here is the result. As you can see, the placement of each window is kind of random. This is a cool thing about the bathhouse design, but now I have to take care of the last layers, let's say the last floors of the bathhouse. So off camera I made this smaller box right here for one floor, and this one right here is for the top floor, and the bottom face is bigger because it also has some balcony going on. And this one I've added this piece of styrene right here on the bottom to create a distance in between the layers. If you look at the reference pictures, you'll see that there's actually a gap in between the top floors, and I wanted to replicate this effect. So yeah, this is why I kept all the top floors separated into smaller boxes. And this right here is the result. Now the overall structure of the bathhouse is complete, and I can worry about the details. And the first challenge is to make the windows. So let's work on that now. So for the windows, I've made a bunch of tests, as you guys can see. At first, I tried making just a frame that was 3D printed, and I glued real thin plastic bits to the back of it. In this one, I also tried using some metal mesh, but this turned out to be not the brightest solution to the problem. As you can see, when I stacked those together, there's a gap going on from the wire mesh. And so eventually I decided to combine two different pieces that were printed. And I decided to separate these pieces in two because there are no hanging materials, so the overall resolution of the print turns out better. As you can see, I made a bunch of tests, lots of different versions of the pieces. Most of those were not used on the project, but that's totally okay because I can repurpose them into my robots. But eventually I reached the final designs for the project. These are the best versions I could come up with my 3D printer. The lines on some of those is 0.4 millimeters, which is the resolution of the nozzle I'm using. So yeah, I reached the peak performance of my printer, I think. Off camera, as you guys can see right here and right here on each window, I made sort of like a frame so that the windows, the 3D printed pieces could fit perfectly in there, and that's because I want to keep those separated. I don't want to glue them to the model because that would make my life much easier on the painting process. The second biggest challenge of this project is the roofs. There are way too many roofs on this bathhouse. I also tested a bunch of techniques to make the roofs. I made a jig and I created the texture with a woodcut tool, but eventually I decided that 3D printing this simple grid right here was the best and easiest solution. It was just a matter of gluing it to the styrene and then trimming the excess. You just gotta be careful and do that in multiple passes. And of course, the shape of the styrene was previously cut to perfectly match the building dimensions. Once all of the roof tiles had its textures, it was just a matter of positioning them in place and gluing them together with the weld bond type of glue. And to keep the roof tiles nice and secure there, I wedged in some strips of styrene. Now here's the thing, all of the windows on the front of the building also had this tiny roof going on, so yeah, this was a nightmare, to be honest. I had to prepare big strips of styrene with the roof texture going on and trim them and match the sizes, so yeah, this was a pain, but the result paid off really well. As you can see now, this big chunk of styrene is starting to look like a bathhouse, and so yeah, I'm very happy with it. Underneath each window I also added some details, some 3D printed details like this one right here, kind of trying to mimic the wood beams design. The bathhouse design is very interesting. There's a lot of variation and randomness going on, so for some windows I made these smaller 3D printed piece right here, just a bit different from each other to keep things interesting. And this right here is the result. So as you can see, the variation of the sizes of the wood beams kind of makes everything more interesting. But right here I noticed that I actually made a mistake in my design. This gap should be bigger, and also there is no gap going on the other side, so I need to make this first cube just a bit bigger. Now the weld bond type of glue I'm using for this project is amazing because it really fuses the plastic pieces together, but when you need to take them off, it is also a pain. Yeah, this is the only downside of using a type of glue like this one. The pieces will not come off each other if you make a mistake, but that's totally fine. This hole right here will be covered with some 3mm styrene. Actually, I used two layers of 3mm, adding 6mm to the whole height of the first cube. And as I did to the bottom of each window in the front, there's also some wood beams going on for this floor right here. So yeah, this is what I'm gluing to this gap right here. Okay, so next I need to make this window right here. I need to take care of the balcony, and I also need to work on the top floor. This one will be the hardest because of the size of the roof it has. I also glued this piece to the back, which will hold some rooms that it has. But first I'll add a coat of primer. I need to see how things are going on. I know that the primer will give me like a bad time gluing stuff later, but I need to add the primer and see how things are going. The white plastic is kind of annoying and limiting. For this front window right here, I'll use just a 1mm piece of plastic. This is actually not styrene, so yeah, I'm using CA glue for this one. And to add details to that piece, I just trimmed the corners of some failed window tests. Now it is time to face I think the biggest challenge of this project, which is the top roof. It is a big roof with a round shape going on. You guys will see that in a minute. But yeah, this time, I don't know why, but I decided to first create the whole shape of the roof and then add the texture to the top of it. And the cutting mat is actually super helpful in this process because you can check if things are square against the lines that it has printed on it. And so this right here is the basic shape of the top roof. Now I just gotta put that in place and check if everything is correct. And the size looks perfect. Now you see that there's a gap going on in the back right there. That's because the top roof kind of extends backwards to take care to cover some rooms that leaves on the back of the building. I actually decided to glue a couple of styrene sheets to the top of the building before gluing the basic shape of the roof, and these are some laser cut MDF rings that I've cut and I've added to this top plate to create the round shape that the top roof has going on. Styrene and MDF actually doesn't go together well with the weld bond glue, so I'm back to the CA glue for this one now. This was a very painful process. The 2mm styrene piece I'm using is too thick to be bent. I didn't have like 1mm styrene to use in this project. I really gotta look into that. So I had to improvise a way to glue everything together, and I also used some epoxy putty to make the shapes better. Now let's have some fun and let's take care of the back right here. On the back of the building there are a ton of tiny structures going on, let's say. On the top, and this is what I'm making right here, there are two big rooms, and I'm creating it using this piece of wood just to make my life easier and to create a shape kind of faster. I covered the plywood with the 3mm pieces of styrene that you guys are watching right now in the video. Plywood is actually something that I've been using in my last projects, and I think it is a good thing. It kind of makes the whole process faster. I also printed a different design for the windows of these back rooms. Actually, let me take a moment right here to talk about the 3D printed pieces. Every 3D printed piece you guys have seen right here in this video will be available for my patrons on the combat robot tier. Not only that, I also make some variations of these designs, and I'm sure these will be super helpful when it comes to adding details to some robots, let's say. This is also a good moment to thank my Patreon and my Ko-fi supporters. This channel and these videos can only exist because of you guys, so thank you so much for that. I also decided to add a perk to my Patreons, so in every level, when you join my Patreon, you will receive a welcoming shout out on the next video. So right now, I'll give all of my Patreons a shout out. So shout out to Aaron Ryan, Nicholas Chockley, Easy8 Boy, Zenzurathi, Francisco Duarte, Peter Mers, Rob, Ashley Cole, Dave F, Leomi Sadler, Altag, Omar H, Thad Wood, Austin Thompson, Saulo, Colin Webb, Jack Follows, and Roborovsky. Sorry if I butchered anyone's name, but thank you so much for the amazing support and for making this channel possible. Link to the Patreon page, of course, is on the description box. But now back to the video. As you guys can see, I'm making some tiny houses to populate the back of the building. On the back of the bathhouse is where the staff kind of lives, and to me this is a genius aspect of the bathhouse design. The difference in between how the front of the building is portrayed and the back is where the staff lives. This is very interesting, and I tried my best to portray that, to show that, which I think is an interesting statement by the author. Now, I wasn't trying to perfectly mimic the houses that exist on the concept art. I just randomly created some tiny houses to go on the back. Now it is time to glue all of those to the back of the building. So these are the biggest two rooms on the top right here. CA glue to attach the piece of wood to the styrene, and then it was time to attach the staff houses on this lower portion right here. Now, as these are randomly shaped, I spent some time kind of figuring out the best layout for those, not being too precious about it, but trying to create a feel of randomness while still maintaining a good weight distribution. And once I decided on the layout, I kind of roughened up the surface and attached the tiny houses to the back. And you can see that there's still some space left. I'll use that to add some pipes to add even more detail to it. I'm almost there right now. I just need to add texture to the top roof. So I'm using this low viscosity CA glue to coat the styrene piece, and then I'm positioning the texture, the 3D printed texture on the top of it, just like I did in the first time I did. Actually, I used the weld bond type of glue, but I noticed that from styrene to 3D printed piece, the CA glue actually does a better job. At least this is the case with the PLA filament that I'm using. When the glue is set, I can carefully trim the texture with an X-Acto knife. Well, not that carefully actually. But yeah, eventually I got there and all of the roof tiles were covered with the texture. Okay, so now let's do something different right here, and let's add some 3D printed texture to some pieces of styrene. Just kidding, but this is exactly what I need to do right here, as the texture on the front walls of the bathhouse, on the front fence, is too small for me to recreate with my hands. So this right here is actually just a simple infill pattern that the 3D printer kind of creates. It has this option of printing just the infill of the prints. So this is what I did. This is just like 3 or 4 layers of the infill printed on the surface, and I just had to glue it with CA glue, with low viscosity CA glue, to the styrene. Now, as you can see in the video, it is super fragile and almost impossible to cut without breaking it, but that's totally okay. Once I had 2 big pieces of styrene with the texture going on, I prepared the surface on the bathhouse. I kind of roughened up the surface so that the weld bond glue can kind of fuse everything together. And then I could carefully glue some tiny pieces of that styrene with the texture with a 45-degree angle on the corner to make the seams as best as possible. Each piece of that wall had to be trimmed to its needs and cut to the size. This was very long process. Tons of styrene dust were inhaled in the making of this video. I did some off-camera work on the front balcony, as you guys can see right here. Now I need to attach this bent 2mm styrene strip to create the rounded, let's say, roof that sits on the top of the front balcony. And with some random laser cut MDF pieces, I'm creating this other tiny balcony right here, which is on the top of this first one. This roof on the top balcony right here is also super hard to get right, and I don't think I did that, but I've managed to make something that looks okay, if you ask me. But at this point in the project, I'm kind of in a hurry. My girlfriend's birthday is coming close, and I need to finish this thing. So I just went with what I had, and in this one, as you guys can see, I had to use some epoxy putty to create some of the lines. There's an extra tiny house structure going on right here in the top of the roof, so I made the surface flatter and I glued this tiny disc of acrylic, a perfectly round laser cut disc of acrylic, and I had to cover the gap in between that and the roof with more epoxy putty to prepare it to receive that last bit of structure going on there. But now I think we're finally almost done with it. I just need to put a coat of primer to these structures right here. I need to see the whole thing coming together, and then I'll do one more detail pass. So here's the bathhouse with another coat of primer. I did some sanding of the roof. I need some smoothing of the overall shapes. Now I'll add the pipes on the side and on the back of the building. This is a very fun process to make. I just grabbed some aluminum wire that I had and I kind of randomly bent it, kind of trying to create an interesting shape. Of course, having in mind the structures that I had on the side of the bathhouse. But yeah, once I did that, I just had to press the metal wire against the surface of the bathhouse to mark where I needed the holes to be. I made the holes and then I glued the aluminum wire with some CA glue. Very easy and fun to make process. Now here's a tip for you guys. I have my aluminum wire kind of rolled up like this, and this is not good. I need to make it straight first, and here's a quick way to do that. If you firmly grab it with a couple of pliers and pull them outside like this, yeah, it gets straight and it is ready to be used. And if you thought that this project would have no greebly going on, you got it wrong, my friend, because right here I'm using the good old keyboard key from a dead laptop. Just to add some detail, this part right here is where the chimney is kind of attached to. I'm not making the chimney for this project because I think it will make the whole thing kind of too big and clumsy, but I'm making the attachment to it anyways. Right here in the roof, we also have a chimney going on, at least in the concept art that I checked to make this project. And this interesting piece that looks like a chimney came from an old radio, a car radio that I took apart. It is a video right here in the channel, and you should check that out if you haven't already. And right here is the final top building structure. This interesting piece can be easily found inside some air cans or deodorant bottles or spray cans, anything like that. And this is the end result. This right here is ready to be painted, and I can wait to start it. Okay, so let's go for it. Let's use some acrylic paints to paint this model. This is going to be challenging. This is a smaller scale than usual. This is my first time doing something this small, so let's see how that goes. And also the tools for this project are brushes. I'm not using airbrush on this one. I decided to avoid the airbrush for this project because I wanted to give this model the hand-painted background feel from the anime, from the movie. And so throughout the whole painting process, I went adding layers of different, slightly different colors to reach that background hand-painted feel. Now hand brushes layers are much thicker than the airbrush ones, so yeah, I had to use the hair dryer a lot right here to make the whole process faster. And this is an example of what I was talking about the different colors, different layers. I made this pink layer to go on the top of the orange one, and by adding them kind of randomly, I kind of reached that feel of a background that was hand painted by the animator. At this point, I also gotta be careful because I'll apply a coat of matte varnish to this model by the end of the process, and so I need to always make the colors just a little more saturated than they need to be in the end result. So this is why the building is very red right here. Then I made this bluish gray right here to be like the background, the backdrop for the windows on the front of the building. And as I didn't cap the top floor window frames separated from the body of the building, this was just a bit harder to paint. They also turned out a little darker than usual, but that's totally okay also because the top roof kind of shadows these rooms. To try to mimic some cloud reflections on the front windows, I did some strokes of some different shades of that same bluish gray. And of course, in this process, I made some small mistakes that I had to correct. Then I went for the brown in the wooden structures on the windows. There are tons of wooden structures on this model, on the front, on the sides, and especially on the back where the staff lives. So this was a long process also. Once that was done, I could paint the roof. This is the second most important color in this project, I think. The red being the first one, in my opinion. So yeah, I really spent some time thinking about the colors, trying to get it right, and also having in mind that the matte varnish will kind of change it all. As I was running out of time, I wasn't able to add as much detail to the bottom of the building as I wanted, so I made these rock colors right here, and I tried to create this blending effect with the red colors of the walls of the building. In my projects, I usually go for an oil wash on the top of a glossy varnish layer, but I didn't want it to add too many layers for this project, so I avoided the glossy varnish, so I went with an acrylic wash. And after the wash process, and as the last touch for this project, I had to add the golden paint. Now of course there are tons of golden details on this model, and I quite didn't get those right. I'm missing some features of the building that are golden, but anyways, this room right here in the top of the building is golden, and I did paint that alongside some other tiny details here and there. And this right here is the end result. This was a super challenging project. I never worked on something that small in such a small scale. So yeah, this was super challenging to make, and I've learned a lot by making this model. Also, I gotta say that the editing of the video was done after I gave the gift for my girlfriend, and I can say the tears were successfully extracted. So yeah, mission accomplished. But let me know what you think in the comment sections below. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Check the links on the description box. And as always, thanks for watching.